Hello from Mindset Daily, wishing you a day full of health, peace, and happiness. Thank you for watching the Mindset Daily channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us. Thank you so much. What if silence could be your greatest weapon? What if staying calm in the chaos was actually the most powerful move you could make? And what if the real strength isn't found in your reaction, but in your restraint? In today's world, we're taught to speak up, fight back, and defend ourselves at every turn. Respond to every insult. Argue every accusation. Stand against every injustice. But there's a different kind of strength. One that doesn't scream for attention, doesn't demand retaliation, and doesn't chase revenge. It's a quiet, unwavering strength that holds firm even as the storm swirls all around. This kind of strength knows when to remain silent, not out of fear, but out of faith. Because that silence is not weakness. It's spiritual power. The Bible says in Exodus 14 verse 14, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Just let that sink in for a moment. God is not asking us to panic, to scramble, or to yell. He's asking us to trust. Think about when the Israelites were trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea. Fear gripped them, just like it does with us in moments of pressure. They wanted to run or fight back. But instead, Moses gave them a divine instruction that defied all logic: stand still. Can you imagine that? With your enemies closing in and no visible way out, you're told to stop, to wait, to say nothing. But right there in that silence, God moved. He parted the sea, not through noise or force, but through stillness and faith. So when we choose to be silent and act as if nothing bothers us, we're not ignoring the pain. We're not pretending everything is fine. We are surrendering the battle to the one who sees every injustice and knows every truth. We're rising above the chaos, refusing to let it shake our peace. That is not weakness. That is faith in action. That is the kind of strength heaven recognizes. The world says, prove yourself. But God says, be still. The world tells you to shout louder. But God gently says, hold your peace. And if there's one thing life has taught me, it's this. The more you trust God, the less you feel the need to explain yourself to people. Because when God is doing the fighting for you, you don't have to raise your voice. He's already speaking on your behalf. You see, it's not about raising your voice. It's about raising your faith. There will be times when your heart feels shattered, when the pressure builds inside you, and everything in you wants to react. You want to speak out, to defend yourself when you're lied about, when people misunderstand you, when they treat you unfairly. That urge is real. It's human nature. But here's the truth. Nothing rattles the enemy more than a person who refuses to be provoked, who chooses to stay silent and turn to prayer instead of panic, who embraces peace when pride tempts them to retaliate. You don't have to answer every critic. You don't have to chase down every rumor or clear up every lie. That's not your assignment. That battle belongs to God. And when you choose to hold your tongue, when you remain calm even though you have every reason to lash out, heaven is watching. God sees every moment of self-control. He honors the tears you cried in private, and in time, He will reward you openly for what you endured quietly. Think about Jesus. He stood before His accusers, mocked, slapped, spat on, humiliated. Yet He said nothing. Not because He didn't have a defense. Not because He lacked the power to speak. But because He was fully surrendered to the will of the Father. He wasn't trying to win in the court of public opinion. He came to win the eternal battle over sin and death. And that victory was won through silence, through humility, and through obedience. And if the Son of God could stay silent while being falsely accused, then we, too, can learn to hold our peace when we're misunderstood. If He could remain composed while being wronged, then we can stay steady when others talk behind our backs. Because at the end of the day, our identity is not found in the opinions of people. It's rooted in the unchanging truth of God's Word. And here's what His Word reminds us. You are mine. I have called you by name. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. When you carry that kind of truth in your spirit, when it lives in your bones, you don't flinch at every insult. You're not shaken by every rumor. You don't need to fire back at every challenge thrown your way. Instead, you enter every room with calm assurance, wrapped in peace, knowing that the God who created you is also the God who covers you. This isn't about pretending like nothing ever gets to you. It's about living with the steady conviction that God is in control, even when everything around you feels chaotic. And that kind of unwavering trust, it frustrates the enemy. He wants you distracted, emotionally triggered, tangled in meaningless drama, spending your energy on battles that were never yours to begin with. But when you choose silence over struggle, you rob him of that power. You shift the atmosphere. Choosing stillness in the face of chaos isn't weakness, it's warfare. It confuses the enemy. He doesn't know what to do with a believer who refuses to crumble under pressure, who stands tall in the fire and still believes. So if you're in a season where people don't understand you, where lies are swirling and your heart is heavy with injustice, don't give in. Don't lose your peace. Be silent, even when every part of you wants to speak. Let them gossip. Let them assume. Let them misunderstand. Because truth doesn't panic, it endures. And God doesn't tremble before your enemies. He prepares a table in their presence. So keep walking, keep trusting, keep believing, and act as if nothing bothers you. Not because you're numb, but because your heart is anchored. Anchored in faith, anchored in grace, anchored in the unshakable power of the one who holds your future. Let God defend you, and you'll witness him move in ways your words never could. You see, anyone can be loud when life gets loud. It's easy to lash out when someone wounds your pride, when offense tries to take root. But as you grow in your walk with God, you begin to understand a deeper truth. Not everything deserves your reaction. In fact, the way you choose not to react often says far more about your character than any words you could ever speak. Silence, in the right moment, becomes a declaration of strength. When you've walked with the Lord long enough, when you've experienced his faithfulness through the storms, you begin to see life through a different lens. You start to realize that spiritual maturity isn't measured by how quickly you clap back, but by how completely you trust God to take care of what you can't control. It's not revealed by how loudly you speak, but by how calmly you endure. The world encourages instant responses. Stand up for yourself. Say your piece. Don't let that slide. But heaven is watching for the ones who stay composed. The ones who walk away in peace instead of plunging into conflict. The ones who choose humility over ego, silence over shouting. Because in the quiet, faith grows louder. Just think about Jesus. Standing there, betrayed by one of his own, surrounded by false accusations, abandoned by those who once called him teacher. He didn't shout back. He didn't raise his voice to prove his innocence. He didn't lash out to restore his reputation. Instead, he stood silently, composed, steady, full of grace and unshakable power. That, right there, is what true maturity looks like. That's strength submitted to a higher will. That's power under control. And we're called to follow that same example. You see, when someone disrespects you, when they push your buttons, and you don't respond the way they expect, something changes. That's when your light begins to shine brightest. That's when your faith starts to speak louder than any defense you could mount. Because people take notice when you don't take the bait. They notice when you hold your peace while others fall apart. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the mark of someone being led not by emotion, but by the Spirit. It's easy to react. Anyone can do that. But it takes real strength to remain still, composed, and anchored in grace. Anyone can lose their temper. Anyone can raise their voice when emotions run high. But it takes the hand of God resting firmly on your heart to remain still. It takes the guidance of his Spirit to help you bite your tongue, to swallow your pride, and to release what's out of your control into his hands. And let me tell you something important. There is far more power in restraint than in retaliation. That doesn't mean you won't feel it. You will. The pain will be real. People will disappoint you. Some will spread lies. Others will abandon you in your time of greatest need. And everything inside you, every impulse, will scream for justice. You'll want to defend yourself, to speak your truth, to clear your name. But sometimes, the higher path is the quieter one. Sometimes, strength looks like silence. There are moments when God whispers, "Let me be your defense. Let me deal with what they said. Let me reveal the truth in my perfect timing." And in those moments, silence becomes your shield. Not because you're hiding, but because you've learned the wisdom of waiting. You've discovered the value of listening before speaking, of pausing before reacting. That's how you guard not only the peace around you, but the peace within you. That kind of emotional discipline doesn't come from willpower alone. It's a fruit of walking closely with the Lord. It's forged in moments of quiet surrender, in choosing faith over impulse. And believe it or not, there are people around you right now, watching. They're observing how you handle pain, how you deal with betrayal, how you navigate gossip and disappointment. And what speaks the loudest isn't your defense, but your demeanor. They're learning what real faith looks like, not by your speeches, but by your self-control. And if you can move through the fire without lashing out, if you can hold your head high without letting your heart grow bitter, then you're offering them a glimpse of something eternal, something unshakable. There's a beautiful verse in Proverbs that says, "A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back." That's not just advice, it's a blueprint for spiritual strength. That verse has the power to protect your peace, your reputation, and even your purpose, if you're willing to let it. Because here's the truth, not every battle is yours to fight. Not every insult deserves your reply, and not every offense is worth the energy it demands. So why waste your strength on something that doesn't serve your destiny? The enemy knows this. That's why his strategy is so subtle. He doesn't always come in full force. Sometimes, he comes through petty arguments and distractions. He wants you to take the bait, to get offended, to grow bitter, to react emotionally. Because if he can't take you down from the outside, he'll try to ruin your witness from the inside. He'll try to make you forfeit your peace without even realizing it. But God is calling you to something higher. He's inviting you to rise above the noise, to embrace grace, to walk with a level of maturity that only comes from being in His presence. It's not easy to stay calm when you feel provoked. It takes spiritual discipline to remain still when chaos calls your name. But when you do, when you choose peace over pride and calm over chaos, God notices. Let me assure you of this. When you stay calm under pressure, when you refuse to let offense settle in your heart, heaven sees it. God honors it. You might not always have the last word, and truthfully, you won't need it. Because the only word that truly matters has already been spoken, and it's eternal. That word says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." It says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And it says, "Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength." So walk with that quiet confidence. Let your silence preach more powerfully than your anger ever could. Sometimes, the loudest declaration of growth is what you choose not to respond to. There is a kind of peace this world can never give you, and it's the kind it can never take away either. It doesn't come from everything going right. It doesn't depend on applause, praise, or people liking you. True peace is rooted in something much deeper. It's knowing, with every fiber of your being, that no matter what's happening around you, God is still in control. That kind of peace, my friend, is far more than just a comforting feeling. It's a weapon, a spiritual weapon. When everything around you is spinning out of control, when circumstances are falling apart, and yet your spirit remains steady, that's a direct threat to the enemy. That's what real spiritual warfare looks like. Because the devil doesn't know what to do with someone who should be breaking down, but chooses to worship instead. He expects you to lash out, to spiral in fear, to let anger take over. He expects you to panic, to question God, to fall apart under pressure. But when you stay calm, when you choose stillness, when you act as if nothing bothers you, not because you're ignoring reality, but because you're anchored in truth, your silence becomes a roar in the spiritual realm. It's a declaration. I trust my God more than I fear the storm. You may not feel it instantly, but never underestimate the power of peace. Not just peace in your relationships or peace in your surroundings, but peace within yourself. That unshakable stillness, that quiet strength, that inner calm under fire. This is the space where the Holy Spirit does His deepest work. That's where breakthrough begins. That's where miracles are born. Not in the noise, not in the chaos, but in the kind of peace that declares, God is with me. You don't have to fall apart just because life seems to be. The enemy will try everything to disrupt that. He'll flood your mind with confusion. He'll use offense, frustration, and subtle lies to stir your emotions. He wants to push your buttons, provoke your pride, and pull you out of your peace. Because once you lose your peace, you become vulnerable, open to fear, anger, and doubt. When your heart becomes unsettled, when your mind starts racing, and when your emotions begin to lead, you start drifting from the security of God's authority. That's the moment when you're no longer operating from a place of faith. But the second you choose to stand firm and say, "I will not be shaken," even when everything in you wants to react, you reclaim your spiritual ground. Peace is not weakness. It's not denial. It's not passivity. True peace is power. Power that's fully surrendered to the Spirit of God. Power that's no longer controlled by fear. And power that cannot be moved by the storms of life. Peace speaks in a language the world doesn't always understand. It says, "I may not know what tomorrow holds, but I trust the one who holds tomorrow in his hands." Peace declares, "Even though I'm surrounded by pressure and uncertainty, I know I'm never truly alone." Peace stands firm and whispers, "Let the world rage on. I am anchored to the rock that cannot be shaken." The Apostle Paul reminds us in Colossians 3 verse 15, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, "Let your feelings take charge." He didn't say, "Let fear guide your decisions." No, he said, "Let peace rule. Let it take the lead. Let it be the compass of your heart. Let peace be the one that tells your anxious thoughts to quiet down, that reminds your soul to stay grounded even when the winds of life are howling all around you." And make no mistake, this kind of peace is not fake. It's not a plastic smile or a mask you wear while pretending everything is fine. It's not a denial of your pain or your problems. No, this peace is real. It walks with you through the valley. It's the strength that holds you up when you feel like falling apart. It's the gentle hand of a Savior who doesn't promise a storm-free life, but promises to never leave your side in the middle of it. Yes, there will be tears. There will be grief. There will be heartache. But peace doesn't mean the absence of struggle. It means the presence of God within it. You don't collapse under the weight because you've learned to lean on the one who holds you together. Your peace is not built on what's going right. It's built on Christ, and he never changes. And you can be sure of this. The enemy will do everything he can to rob you of that peace. He'll use people who push your buttons. He'll stir up stress, distractions, and unexpected chaos. He'll try to blindside you with problems that come out of nowhere. But here's the truth. Peace is not something the world can offer, and it's certainly not something it can take away. Jesus himself said, "My peace I give to you, not as the world gives." That means no person, no pressure, no problem has the power to steal your peace, unless you hand it over. You have authority to guard it. You have the choice to protect it. So the next time life comes at you with intensity, don't let your emotions lead the charge. Don't react from the flesh. Respond with peace. Let it steady your steps. Let it center your soul. And when others look at you, puzzled by your calm in the chaos, you'll be able to answer, "I'm at peace because I know my Redeemer lives." I've seen what God can do. I've walked through storms before, and I didn't survive them by accident. I made it through by grace. The most powerful testimony you might ever give isn't in the words you speak from a platform. It's in the way you carry yourself when life is pressing in from every direction. It's in how you hold your peace when the storm is loud, when everything around you seems to be unraveling, when others are breaking down and you're still standing, still smiling, still believing. That quiet confidence speaks volumes. There's a magnetism to that kind of peace. People notice it. They're drawn to it. And eventually, they'll ask where it comes from. And that's your moment. That's when you get to point them to the one who calms the wind and the waves with just a single word. That's why your peace matters. That's why your silence matters. Because every time you choose not to react out of anger, every time you act like nothing bothers you, not because you're numb, but because you trust, you're making a statement. You're declaring, without saying a word, that God is still on the throne. You're engaging in a battle without swinging a sword. You're gaining victory without raising your voice. You're demonstrating strength, not human strength, but divine peace, the kind that transcends understanding. And sometimes, that peace is the only answer you need. There's something deeply powerful about choosing restraint when everything inside you screams for retaliation. It takes real strength to stay low when your pride wants to rise up. In a world that thrives on reactions, silence becomes your rebellion. And when your silence comes from wisdom and not fear, you place yourself directly under God's protection, a place your enemy cannot touch. Sometimes God doesn't want your voice in the situation. He doesn't want your defense, your explanation, or even your opinion. Sometimes He simply wants you still. not because you're weak, but because He is preparing to speak on your behalf. And when God speaks, when He moves, when He executes justice, there's nothing left to add. No word from you could improve it. His judgment is final. His timing is flawless. His justice is always righteous. Now, I understand, those moments can feel lonely. You may feel invisible, like no one sees your pain. You might wonder how they got away with it, how they wounded you so deeply, mocked your faith, twisted your words, misunderstood your heart, and walked away as if it meant nothing. But let me remind you of something unshakable. Not one tear escapes the notice of the one who sees it all. No injustice ever escapes the eyes of the judge of all the earth. When you choose to stay quiet, when you carry your pain with grace instead of resentment, heaven leans in just a little closer. Because silence in the middle of suffering isn't a sign of weakness. It's living, breathing faith in action. It's a quiet surrender that says, God, I trust you more than I trust my own words. So many people lose their peace by trying to control outcomes they were never meant to handle. They argue with people who have already stopped listening. They plead with those who have no intention of understanding. They pour their energy into proving a point to people whose minds are already made up. But friend, you don't need to waste your breath convincing anyone of anything. When God defends you, His vindication is louder than any explanation you could ever give. And His timing? It's perfect. Think about Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused in Egypt, locked away in a prison cell for a crime he never committed. Yet, not once do we read that Joseph tried to plead his case. He didn't beg for mercy from his brothers. He didn't try to argue with Potiphar's wife. He didn't protest against the injustice of the prison system. Instead, he remained steady. He kept his focus upward, not outward. And in due time, God's time, he wasn't just set free. He was lifted up, elevated from a prisoner to a ruler. Not because of the words he spoke, but because of how faithfully he endured. You see, when God watches you hold your tongue in the face of betrayal, He doesn't just notice it, He honors it. When He sees you resist the urge to fight back, to gossip, to curse those who wronged you, He takes that restraint personally. You may not witness the result overnight. It might feel like nothing's changing. But silence, when surrendered to God, becomes undeniable evidence in the courtroom of heaven. People will misunderstand you. That's just a part of life. They'll misread your silence. They'll question your intentions. They'll create false narratives about who you are and what you mean. But let them talk. Let them assume. Let them twist the story. Because you're not living for their applause. You're not here to chase approval from people who can't see your heart. You are here to please God. You are here to walk in integrity. And when you do that, when your integrity becomes your defense, you allow heaven to speak on your behalf in a way that no argument ever could. And integrity speaks, even when your lips stay sealed. The way you carry yourself under pressure, the way you respond when mistreated, the way you choose not to return insult for insult. Those quiet choices speak louder than any sermon ever could. They become a living testimony of your walk with God. Because anyone can talk, anyone can clap back, anyone can defend themselves with words. But it takes a deeply surrendered heart to remain silent when every fiber in you wants to shout, to retaliate, to set the record straight. Sometimes that silence, it's not weakness. It's your resounding yes to God. It's your way of saying, Lord, I trust you more than I trust my own voice. I believe your plan is wiser than my reaction. I know you can handle what feels impossible for me to carry. And in those moments, when it feels like you're shrinking, like you're losing the battle, you're actually gaining ground in the spirit. You're sowing seeds of favor, storing up unseen rewards, and walking straight into the destiny God has already prepared. Don't let their opinions shake you. Don't let their misunderstanding change your posture. If they judged you unfairly, if they twisted your story or spoke poorly of you, let it be. Because the one who sees everything sees you. He knows what they don't. And when it's his time to step in, he won't need your words to bring justice. His truth will expose what was hidden. His power will mend what was broken. And everything you thought you lost because you stayed quiet, he will restore it with increase. You weren't created to fix every problem. You weren't called to carry every weight. You were called to be faithful. You were designed to cast your burdens, not carry them alone. So when you hold your peace in the face of chaos, when you stay quiet instead of defending yourself, you're not giving up. You're handing it over. You're saying, God, this is too heavy for me, but it's not too heavy for you. So keep walking in peace. Lift your head with quiet confidence. Let your soul stay still, because the one who called you, he hears every tear that falls, and he sees every injustice you've endured. He hasn't turned away. He hasn't forgotten. Stay in your lane. Stay in your peace. And trust that he's moving, even in the silence. Stay in position. Don't move out of frustration or impatience. Let him vindicate you on his timeline, in his way, and all for his glory. And when he does, it won't take loud announcements or public explanations. Because when God moves, no voice will be able to deny what your silence has already confirmed. Your quiet obedience becomes undeniable evidence of his hand at work. There's something sacred God is doing in the silence. Something he's building deep within you. Sometimes it's not about the noise around you quieting down. It's about your soul quieting enough to finally hear what heaven has been saying all along. When the room grows still, when the phone no longer buzzes, when familiar voices fade, and when the people you thought would stay begin to disappear, it's not rejection. It's not abandonment. It's preparation. Because more often than not, when the world grows silent around you, that's exactly when heaven begins to speak the loudest within you. Those quiet seasons that feel like isolation, they are often divine appointments, places of refining, sacred spaces where you are not forgotten. You are being formed. In those hidden corners of life, where you feel unseen or overlooked, God is doing his most intricate work. He's removing the noise that drowns out his voice. He's peeling away your dependence on external approval. He's showing you that his affirmation is enough, that his presence is all you really need, that his plan doesn't rely on anyone else's support, applause, or recognition. There's a reason Jesus often withdrew to quiet, solitary places. It wasn't because he didn't care about people. It was because he understood something vital, something we often forget. The strength you need to stand in public comes from the time you spend in private. The real victory is not won when the crowd cheers. It's won in the silence, when no one sees but God. And maybe you've been asking those hard questions lately. Why was that door closed? Why did that person walk away? Why does it feel like you've been set aside? But what if, instead of being set aside, you've been set apart? God may be pulling you back, not to punish you, but to prepare you. Not to abandon you, but to equip you for what's ahead. He's not finished. He's just getting you ready. I separated you, God says, not to harm you, but to sanctify you. In the stillness, in the quiet that can feel so lonely, something sacred is happening. That's where your true motives are tested. That's where your heart is revealed. When the applause fades, when the texts stop coming in, when the room is empty and there's no one watching, are you still faithful? Are you still kneeling in prayer? Are you still believing when there's no one cheering you on? That is the kind of faith that moves mountains. Not the kind that craves a spotlight, but the kind that quietly presses on when no one is looking. It's this private perseverance that carries real power. That's why embracing the silence is not just important, it's essential. Because that sacred quiet is the space where God does what only he can do. So keep walking in peace. Lift your head with quiet confidence. Let your soul stay still, because the one who called you, he hears every tear that falls, and he sees every injustice you've endured. He hasn't turned away. He hasn't forgotten. Stay in your lane. Stay in your peace. And trust that he's moving, even in the silence. Stay in position. Don't move out of frustration or impatience. Let him vindicate you on his timeline, in his way, and all for his glory. And when he does, it won't take loud announcements or public explanations. Because when God moves, no voice will be able to deny what your silence has already confirmed. Your quiet obedience becomes undeniable evidence of his hand at work. There's something sacred God is doing in the silence. Something he's building deep within you. Sometimes it's not about the noise around you quieting down. It's about your soul quieting enough to finally hear what heaven has been saying all along. When the room grows still, when the phone no longer buzzes, when familiar voices fade, and when the people you thought would stay begin to disappear, it's not rejection. It's not abandonment. It's preparation. Because more often than not, when the world grows silent around you, that's exactly when heaven begins to speak the loudest within you. Those quiet seasons that feel like isolation, they are often divine appointments, places of refining, Sacred spaces where you are not forgotten. You are being formed. In those hidden corners of life, where you feel unseen or overlooked, God is doing his most intricate work. He's removing the noise that drowns out his voice. He's peeling away your dependence on external approval. He's showing you that his affirmation is enough, that his presence is all you really need, that his plan doesn't rely on anyone else's support, applause, or recognition. There's a reason Jesus often withdrew to quiet, solitary places. It wasn't because he didn't care about people. It was because he understood something vital, something we often forget. The strength you need to stand in public comes from the time you spend in private. The real victory is not won when the crowd cheers. It's won in the silence, when no one sees but God. And maybe you've been asking those hard questions lately. Why was that door closed? Why did that person walk away? Why does it feel like you've been set aside? But what if, instead of being set aside, you've been set apart? God may be pulling you back, not to punish you, but to prepare you, not to abandon you, but to equip you for what's ahead. He's not finished. He's just getting you ready. I separated you, God says, not to harm you, but to sanctify you. In the stillness, in the quiet that can feel so lonely, something sacred is happening. That's where your true motives are tested. That's where your heart is revealed. When the applause fades, when the texts stop coming in, when the room is empty and there's no one watching, are you still faithful? Are you still kneeling in prayer? Are you still believing when there's no one cheering you on? That is the kind of faith that moves mountains. Not the kind that craves a spotlight, but the kind that quietly presses on when no one is looking. It's this private perseverance that carries real power. That's why embracing the silence is not just important, it's essential. Because that sacred quiet is the space where God does what only he can do. Let him strip away the noise. Let him still the chaos inside you. Because sometimes we don't realize how loud the world has become within us until it finally grows quiet. And in that hush, something begins to shift. We start to hear again, really hear. The whisper of God rises above the noise of self-doubt, fear, and distraction. We begin to remember our true identity, not the version others try to assign to us, not the labels our past tried to stick on us, but the identity spoken by the one who formed us. And that kind of identity, it isn't built in crowds or carved out by applause. It's forged in solitude. That's where roots grow deep. That's where unshakable conviction is born. That's where your calling gets clarified, not under lights, but in the stillness where God is your only audience. Now let's be real. That silence can feel heavy. It can feel like abandonment, like your prayers are hitting the ceiling and falling back down unanswered. You may even wonder, has God forgotten me? But I promise you, he hasn't. God never wastes silence. He hears every whisper, sees every tear, and leans in closer when the world backs away. He's not ignoring you in your waiting. He's working. And sometimes, what he's doing in you matters far more than what you're asking him to bring to you. You might be praying for a platform, but he's building your character. You're asking for recognition, but he's cultivating your integrity. You want the breakthrough, but he's preparing your heart so it can carry the weight of the blessing when it arrives. And if God answered every prayer too soon, if he gave you everything the moment you asked, would you be ready to carry it? Sometimes, blessings come with weight, and if you're not prepared, that weight could crush you. That's why the silence matters. That's why you must never despise those quiet seasons. They're not empty. They're sacred. They are the proving grounds, the hidden places where God shapes the next level of your purpose. So don't run from the silence. Don't rush to escape it or fill it with noise. Let it stretch you. Let it strengthen you. Let it teach you to rely more on God and less on your own strength. Those silent moments are where your spiritual muscles are built. It's in the stillness where you learn to endure, to trust, and to grow roots that go deeper than emotion. And when the silence finally lifts, and it will, you won't be the same. You'll rise from that place more steady, more mature, and more anchored in truth. You'll carry a quiet confidence because you've learned not to be swayed by applause or discouraged by criticism. Your foundation won't be built on noise, but on unshakable trust in the one who never fails. And when that day comes, when God calls you out of the shadows and into the spotlight, when doors open that no human could have opened, you'll know the truth. It wasn't your striving that got you there. It was your surrender. It wasn't about performance or popularity. It was about patience and process. Every quiet hour, every unseen act of faithfulness, every tear shed in private, it all counted. None of it was wasted. It was essential. It was divine preparation. So keep walking, keep trusting, keep showing up with faith, even when no one sees it. Because God is still writing your story, and the next chapter holds more than you can imagine. When it finally unfolds, you won't need to shout. Your silence will have already spoken volumes. There comes a time when you learn to walk with quiet strength. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned that not every battle is worth fighting with words. There is deep wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to let your peace speak for itself. Sometimes, the most powerful statement you can make is to simply remain still, to lift your head, guard your heart, and keep moving forward with grace. We live in a world that feeds on reaction. It urges you to defend yourself in the heat of the moment, to clap back, to prove your value to people who were never meant to define you. But God never called you to live that way. He didn't design you to be reactive, tossed by every offense or opinion. He called you to be rooted, grounded, unshaken, led not by the chaos of others, but by the calm voice of His Spirit. And when you walk in that stillness, when you manage to hold your peace while everyone else around you is losing theirs, you're not retreating. You're rising above. You're choosing strength over reaction, wisdom over impulse. Don't let the volume of this world pull you into battles that only drain your soul. Don't allow the chaos of others to shake the calm within you. Just because someone is shouting doesn't mean they're speaking truth. Just because someone pushes your buttons doesn't mean you need to respond. Your silence can become your shield. Your calmness, your composure, that becomes your crown. And the ability to keep walking forward as if nothing has shaken your peace, that's not ignorance. That's maturity. That's wisdom dressed in strength. Because when the enemy finds out he can't destroy you, he'll try to distract you instead. He'll stir the waters. He'll send confusion, provoke people to twist your words, misjudge your motives, stir up conflict, all in hopes of getting a reaction. But the moment you take the bait, the moment you step into the arena to fight battles that God never told you to fight, you begin to spend your energy on what doesn't serve your purpose. You lose time. You lose peace. You trade your clarity for chaos. And for what? You're not called to defend yourself against every opinion. You're not responsible for changing their minds, for fixing their view of you, or for straightening out every lie they tell. You are responsible for one thing: how you respond. And sometimes, the wisest response is silence. Not because you're weak, and not because you lack the words, but because you know who's truly in control. You've learned to trust the one who sees every hidden detail, who hears every word spoken in secret, and who judges with justice. Silence isn't surrender. It's discipline. It's spiritual restraint that says, God, I trust you more than I trust my own defense. And here's the powerful truth. God never fails in defending His children. What He does in your defense will echo louder than anything you could ever say. Think about how Jesus stood before His accusers. They hurled lies. They twisted His words. They attacked His character. And yet, He stood there, still, composed, silent. False accusations were hurled from every direction. Yet Jesus stood there in complete silence. Not because He had no defense, but because He didn't need one. He wasn't silent out of weakness. He was silent because He was walking in destiny. He knew that truth, when it walks with God, doesn't need to shout to be seen. It stands on its own, unshaken and eternal. And if Jesus, the Son of God, could remain silent in the face of lies, betrayal, and judgment, when every fiber of justice screamed for Him to speak, then so can we. Not through our own strength, but through surrender. Because that's what this is really about. Surrendering to purpose. Purpose requires focus. And you can't fulfill your calling if you're constantly distracted by those who were never assigned to understand your journey. You can't move forward if your energy is being drained trying to justify your heart to people committed to misunderstanding it. Let them talk. Let them whisper. Let them assume. You, on the other hand, just keep moving. Keep building what God told you to build. Keep praying, serving, growing, and trusting. And here's the beauty of it. Your fruit will speak. Your peace will preach. Your consistency will say more than any defense ever could. That's the power of silence. It transforms your life into a living testimony. Because you don't belong to this world's noisy system of attention and validation. You belong to a kingdom that moves in quiet strength and reigns with unshakable authority. You are a citizen of that kingdom, and your worth isn't found in applause or argument. It's found in walking faithfully, even when no one understands your steps. What God started in you, He will finish, and He doesn't need man's approval to bring it to completion. So when the season shifts and the doors begin to open, when the promise finally unfolds, those who mocked your silence will witness your breakthrough. Those who questioned your motives will see the favor you carried all along. And those who tried to tear you down will realize they were contending with someone protected by divine purpose. Don't be moved by the noise around you. Don't let the chaos drag you down. Guard your spirit. Be still. And walk with the kind of strength that looks unbothered. Because deep down, you know your victory is already secured. And that quiet confidence, that peace you carry, it will become the loudest testimony of all. Wishing you peace, strength, and unshakable joy. If this message speaks to your soul, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mindset Daily for more faith-filled encouragement. Stay blessed.